On Facebook and YouTube. It is time for our Steeler postgame show for December 3rd as the Steelers get upset at Acrisure Stadium this afternoon to the Arizona Cardinals, who were 2-10 coming in this afternoon. The Steelers lose 24-10. Not only do they lose the game, but they have big injuries. The quarterback Kenny Pickett, inside another injury at inside linebacker with Roberts going out. T.J. Watt was banged up towards the end of the game. Chris Boswell missed a field goal. He never misses a field goal. Everything that could go wrong did this afternoon. Even the weather went south quickly multiple times, delaying the game. And thus, your Pittsburgh Steelers fall to 7-5 now on the season. Two games in which all of us looked at in the next 5 days tonight. And then also this upcoming Thursday evening against the New England Patriots, who also only have a couple wins on the season. An opportunity for the Black and Gold to go to 9-4 and put themselves in a really good position going forward in the NFL season as far as playoff seeding goes. Now, as we sit, amazingly how the AFC is this year, the Steelers with this loss go from the 5th seed to, I believe, out of the playoff picture looking, because they would be tied with the Houston Texans, who won today at 7-5, and Houston beat the Steelers earlier this season. So thus they would win the tiebreaker, and thus they would go into that final playoff spot if the playoffs would start today. But a lot to be figured out between now and then. But it's going to be hard for anyone, I think, to feel good about the Steelers going forward after today and after what we saw. They have a quick turnaround, though. If there's any good news that we can talk about, it's the fact that the Steelers can forget about this loss pretty quick, because they have to, as they will turn around quick and host the New England Patriots on Thursday night at Acrisure Stadium on Thursday Night Football. However, now what we saw today leaves that game very much in question. Let's bring in our panel for this afternoon to talk about what we just saw. We'll start with Dawn Rebel from the Trib Live High School Sports Network. Dawn, who joined me a couple weeks ago with a loss. And now Dawn joins me again for yet another loss. We're starting to see a pattern here.
I think this is my last guest visit with you and Brian. At 0-2, 2 bad losses. Time to pull the plug.
Yeah, this could be it. This could be your final appearance this afternoon. Dawn, let's just jump into it real quick. And we got Dave Finoli and Chris Fletcher as well coming up here in just a second. But get your thoughts first before we go to them. A game in which all of us going into today, especially when you factor in that we're not playing on the West Coast, we're not playing at Arizona, we're at home at Acrisure Stadium. You get Mika Fitzpatrick back on defense. What we saw last week at Cincinnati gave us a lot of hope. Now it might be false hope from what we saw of an offense that was changing their ways this season. The defense continued to shine, but all that got thrown out this afternoon as they go down.
You know, I told a buddy of mine late when it was pretty much a done deal what was going to happen here. I've been watching Steeler games 51 years, which means I'm old. This is probably the second most embarrassing performance by a Steeler team that I can remember. The one that jumps out is the 2002 loss at home to expansion Houston, when we totally dominated the game. 24 first downs to Houston's 3. They had 3 first downs. Total yards was 422 to 47. This is back in the Tommy Maddox days. And we lost 24-6. So it was just that was a head scratcher. They got what they deserved. They played sloppy, all aspects, special teams. Miles Killebrew is a special teams standout. He's really good, but this was not his day. 3 special teams penalties. Offense, Mason Cole, it starts with the center. He was terrible. The offensive line was bad. And defensively, even before things got out of hand, missed tackles, missed opportunities. They were terrible on third down, both offensively and defensively. It was just a total failure all the way across the board. I don't know if you'd have picked an MVP. I mean, even Boz missed a field goal. It was just, yeah, you're right. You want to wash this one away as soon as possible and get ready for New England. But man, you got a lot of banged up bodies for a short week.
Yeah, very short week indeed. And the Patriots today, they lost nothing, but the key there is their defense only gave up 6 points today. Offense didn't do much, but that at least shows you that maybe New England defensively. And let's face it, Bill Belichick, doesn't matter what that record is. When Belichick comes in to play the Steelers, whether Bill Cowher's the head coach or Mike Tomlin's the head coach, it's going to be a battle. Let's bring in our other panelists here this afternoon. Dave Finoli and Chris Fletcher joining us. They host the weekly podcast Finoli and Fletch on sports, a weekly podcast on sports and that. And gentlemen, thank you for joining the roundtable here this afternoon to talk about this game, this disaster, as some will say. We'll start with Dave real quick. Dave, Dawn was just talking about it. A lot of just uncharacteristic things that are going to happen that just didn't really lead to victory here. And one of those being 0 for 4 on third downs to start the game. That was a big one. And also penalties this afternoon. The Steelers, 9 penalties, and there were some costly ones as well where they the field on third down, and they simply didn't. It gave Arizona life, and the Cardinals capitalized on it.
Yeah, this is the penalties have been a problem all year. The discipline in those situations, and Don had a great comparison to most embarrassing losses, and that's the only reason I would take this one over that Houston one is the fact at least they showed some sort of life in the Houston one. This was a dead fish performance by the team, and to me, the one thing indicative. Chris and I have been talking about this. Yeah, you should have fired your offensive coordinator, but don't expect miracles because they're working off the same playbook.
Right.
Right.
You know, that was apparent here too.
Yeah, Chris, why don't you go ahead and jump in here as well? Give us your thoughts on the Steelers' loss this 24-10 to the Arizona Cardinals, who now improved to 3-10 overall. The Steelers go to 7-5. And Chris, that was Arizona's first road victory going back to early last season. And they certainly haven't come into Pittsburgh and won on the road as well, but they certainly got it done this afternoon, upsetting the black and gold at Acrisure Stadium.
Well, Ed, I'm going to make Dave's eyes glaze over because I'm going to make a statement here that he's not going to understand. Coming into this game, I saw it as an Admiral Akbar game. Do you know what that means, Dave?
I know Captain Crunch, who should be an admiral.
It means it was a trap game from the very beginning. And really where it turned was, to me, Ed, you take that field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 1. You put a new quarterback into the game, completely changed the momentum of that game. Arizona goes on a 99-yard drive. But the thing about that drive was they converted 4 conversions of 10 yards or more. That was, for a defense that throughout the years has really controlled the game. The Steelers would always win the time of possession battle, but not today.
Yeah, they certainly didn't win the time of possession today, Chris. And, when you look back at one interesting stat, and I'll go over the stats here in a little bit with everybody watching here on the Steelers postgame show. This is interesting. The Steelers today, as far as total offensive yards go, they actually outgained Arizona. How about that? 317 to 282. Why that was catch up there towards the end of the game. But
weirdly enough, they did win the time of possession battle, but it didn't amount to anything. I was a little scared when I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it was a lot of just, I think, garbage time there towards the end as they were trying to make it a game. But Dawn, that was the formula for the Steelers so far this season. Get outgained, but still be able to pull off fourth quarter miracles. Of course, we didn't see that a couple weeks ago in Cleveland. We certainly didn't see that too. They just felt like they had just no power behind them on offense or defense this afternoon. Flat is the word I'd like to use.
Yeah, I mean, it's just way too many mistakes. A couple of good. This offense cannot afford to make mistakes, and we had a couple of good runs, productive runs, called back because of illegal formation. We got receivers that are sleeping and not covering up the tackles. Right. A holding penalty here. It's just the offense is not. It's a work in progress. It's a young offense. I agree that, we changed the offensive coordinator, but that's not going to solve the world's problems. And they need to really revamp the entire playbook. Again, unless you watch the all 22, you don't know if the receivers are open or if they're just running routes into the defense. So yeah, little mistakes by the offense keep us from being able to score points, and that's the bottom line. Yeah, 400 yards last week, but you only had 20 points, or whatever they had. You expect right now that this team's got to be led by the defense, and the defense, especially on third down, was atrocious today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave and Chris, I'll let you guys jump in here next. So let's talk about this sequence, which I thought was pretty interesting. In the second quarter, Pickett gets hurt. It's 4th and goal from the 1. They go for it with Trubinsky under center. No push at all on the offensive line. And it's a 3-3 game. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, as good as this defense has played this year, we'll be okay. They're at their own 1-yard line. They're not going to go 99, right? Well, of course, that's exactly what happened. They go 99 yards with Roberts out. They attack the middle of the field, and they did it in a big way. 2 third-down conversions. They hit their rookie tight end, McBride, multiple times, went right down on the field of us. Huge catches down the middle. And Dave, ultimately, I think at least, when they went up 10-3, went 99 yards at Acrisure Stadium on our home turf. In that situation, I really felt like that put the game away. I know there was a lot of time left. There were weather delays, but my goodness, I think everybody in the stadium said this is not a 2-10 football team. Or if they are, maybe we're playing like a 2-10 football team.
I think that's the point right there. I don't think Arizona looked like a superhero team. I think this team looked like a 2-10 football team. That obviously, I mean, you and Chris will talk about a little because he made the great comment with your quarterback out. You take the 3 points at that point in time, and maybe that keeps the momentum. Maybe that doesn't charge you up there. But you know what? This team at that point in time, they look, let's say the word discombobulated. I wanted to get that into the conversation, Chris. You know that.
Well done, my friend.
Thank you. And I just you get frustrated that. The playoff push is here. You have momentum going here. This is a game you should be 8-4 afterwards, and you come out looking flat. Your coaches didn't prepare them well, and quite frankly, is the offensive line that bad? Are they being coached bad? I don't know, but this has been an issue 99% of the time this year with this offense, and as long as they're going to come out like this, you're not going to be a successful team. Offensively.
No, not at all. And Chris, another sequence that I wanted to talk about as well was in the third quarter after the weather delay to start. Of course, Pickett's out. The defense does come out to start off the second half. They force a 3 and out, but then they start their drive and another low snap, which was a major issue today. There were 3 low snaps in this football game from Mason Cole to center. And I can tell you, I coach my youngest son in youth football, as you guys probably know. And even at the youth level, all the way up through middle school, high school, college, and the pros, the snap, when it goes bad, the whole play breaks down. I don't care who you are, what level you're playing, but when there's a bad snap, it's very hard to be able to get back on track on offense. It happened twice in the first half on third down opportunities that cost the Steelers, but this one, Trubinsky was not able to recover. The Cardinals got the football back, and then they go in for a touchdown to make it 17-3.
Yeah, that pretty much ended the game. But, here's the thing, guys. Throughout that entire game, Arizona was the physical team. Pittsburgh was not. I mean, they just had them moving backwards the entire time. Hats off to James Conner. What a great game he had, over 100 yards. But, they set the tone. And, they always talk about Tomlin saying that he's going to have that physical team, but it wasn't today. This is easily the worst loss of the Tomlin era, in my opinion.
Can we talk about something here?
Yes, Dave, good.
I'm looking at some of the comments. And should we be talking about how handsome that Chris guy is?
Oh, jeez.
Here you go. There's your comment. Why aren't we talking about some game, or why are we? There you go.
I'm saying, I think this is where we need to focus. You are a handsome devil.
Well, I try to model my looks after Ed. I mean, that's been my key.
That's it. This is a good look. Don and Dave don't have to worry about that, Chris.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Dawn, talk a little bit too about Joey Porter Jr. this afternoon. There was a lot made up about how well he was playing against Marquise Brown, but then he was called with a key pass interference call that would have held the Cardinals to 3 points in that third quarter, gave them new life. That led to another touchdown in that sequence that we talked about with the defense forcing that 3-and-out to start the second half. And then Porter got beat a couple times late in the fourth quarter too. I mean, overall, he's had an amazing season. He's done a great job. While you're calling out different players and different things in this game, I think that's one thing to note, especially that pass interference call was a killer in the end zone.
Yeah. I mean, it was. But, he's a rookie cornerback, and he came in with a reputation of being a little handsy. And that's exactly what happened in the back of the end zone, is he hooked the intended receiver, and he got caught. And there have been plays where he's hooked guys, and he hasn't been caught. So, I think he's way down the list as far as guys who got to look at themselves in the mirror, especially today, but even really the season overall. There's a lot of holes, and we're seeing more holes now with the injuries, but there's still a lot of holes, even when everybody's healthy, on both sides of the ball that need to be rectified. And again, this regime is relatively new with the general manager and the scouting director and everything like that. So by all accounts, they had they did well in their first draft. It's going to take time. I mean, we got sort of sucked in with how this team is winning. And to me, and I know I am very much in the minority today, to me, that goes to the head coach, that they're having this kind of success. And really what is, to me, still a rebuilding season, even though you do have a lot of well-paid defensive players. I'm not saying it's, that we should be happy with 5 wins by any means, but and respectfully disagree with you guys in the fact that I thought going for it on 4th and 1, you talked about the physical aspect. That's when you make a statement to this team that you're going to be the more physical. Obviously it didn't work out. We get stopped and they go 99 yards. First of all, I also thought the spot was terrible.
I thought so too.
When Pickett dove, he was short of the end zone. He was short of the goal line, but he was about a half yard short. And they spotted it all the way back at the 1. Does that make a difference? Maybe, maybe not. But that's been a problem with this team really over a few years is not being able to win those physical battles, and it showed up on that play.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And, it goes along with, kind of some of the things we were talking about today too, from the Steelers being undisciplined. I do want to get to some of the comments out there. Lee DeVault, he's been pretty hot and heavy here with these comments about Mike Tomlin and us not talking about Tomlin. Here he says Tomlin and his lack of discipline, call him out, guys. Yeah, and there's a lot of comments coming in about Mike Tomlin, and we talked about it too, this being one of the worst losses of his career. But, you still got to look at the body of work of what's happened over all these years with Mike Tomlin. He's not going to go anywhere. However, I've said on here a few times over the last few weeks with some of these losses, maybe it is time to start just putting up the fire a little bit there, because no one, I think, in the organization from the top down in situations like this, when you have performances like this, should not be talked about possibly having their jobs on the line. This is against the Steelers. We're heavily favored, a game which they should have came in and won. But at the same time, I think you got to give credit to Arizona as well, being a 2-10 football team. They showed up today, Dave, here at AccuSure Stadium, and they got it done.
Yeah, no.
with a rookie head coach.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously we're sitting here and picking apart what the Steelers did wrong. You're right. I mean, there's always 2 ways in a game like this, and Arizona did come in, and Arizona. They outplayed them. I mean, everybody. I've been. I don't tend to criticize the coach as much as others, but yeah, today on the Steelers' end, he got outcoached, and it's disappointing. And I can understand everybody's disappointment, but you do have to give Arizona credit, especially in the second half, especially when the game was on the line. They made us look like the expansion team. And James Conner, who was bottled up in the first half, was magnificent in the second half. And James Conner isn't a shifty Barry Sanders type of back. James Connors is a physical back, and he made the Steelers look bad today. He really did. In the
Yeah, when he's healthy, and when he was healthy here, Chris Fletcher, James Conner was a beast. I mean, he was a very effective running back when he was healthy. That was always the big problem with James Conner, and a lot of that is what you just runs. He runs so hard. That's why he was prone to injury so much. But it's tough to root against a guy like James Conner. Not technically local here in the 412, Erie, but did play at Pitt. Great story with fighting and beating cancer. So it's hard to root against James Conner. But man, he has to feel great tonight. Comes out, gets over 100 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, and Chris, James Conner, as Dave said, he looked real good today.
Yeah, and as you said, keeping him healthy has always been the issue. I mean, he came into this game, with more than 5 yards a pop. So, he's been very effective for that team. And, they also got their quarterback back for, a couple of weeks. And Kyler Murray makes some things happen by his mobility. And so, it was a good game plan by the Cardinals.
Yeah, Kyler Murray, not to interrupt you, Chris, real quick, just to piggyback off that, 13 of 23, 145 yards and a touchdown. On the ground, 9 carries for 20 yards as well. He's a mobile. He was able to scramble out of trouble a few times. I thought Kyler Murray, looked pretty good today for Arizona, basically from the standpoint that he didn't cost them the game.
Yeah, that's exactly. He managed the game well. He found his tight ends, and that's for sure. I mean, that middle of the field was open a lot, and they were able to sustain drives. I mean, that again on that 99-yard drive, if you're converting 4 third downs of 10 yards or more, that's a backbreaker.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trey McBride, the rookie tight end, they cut Zach Ertz this past week. And the reason why they did that is they felt really good about Trey McBride, and mostly from his blocking abilities. Not only did he block today, but he went for 8 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. And again, they went to him quite often, especially when they were in trouble on third down this afternoon. Hey, guys, I want to get to a question from Katie May out there, and this is a very good question. Do you think the weather delays hurt us this afternoon? There were 2 weather, especially the second one by an hour.
No more than it would have hurt the Cardinals. I mean, that if anybody's using that as an excuse, and I kind of read a few things online, that's BS in my eyes. Both teams are affected by it the same, and it's not like the Steelers had incredible momentum when it happened. So absolutely not.
Well, Dave, how it really did affect them is that they actually resumed the game. If they would have not resumed the game, I think it would have been a lot better.
You're correct.
Yeah, exactly, Chris. Maybe the way that game was going, and we actually came in on Oneberg halfway through. Brian Carruthers, who's usually on the post-game show today, but today's his birthday. He's with his son Cy and his family, and they are celebrating his birthday this evening. So that's why he's not on with us. Happy birthday to Brian. But he was at the game. He actually came on, and we talked a little bit about the game during the second weather delay. And of course, he had all his pirate things on, and he was bucking at that point. I made fun of him for that, and he'd rather be watching a baseball game. I don't know. Maybe I would have rather been watching a baseball game in that second half. Again, tough to watch. Steelers fall to 7-5 overall. Arizona to 3-10. And Dawn, let's talk about a short week. They got to turn things around very quick. Thursday night, back at AccuSure Stadium against the New England Patriots. And, the Patriots this year, very uncharacteristic of New England. But then not bad. They've been awful, just as bad as Arizona. And again, this morning, if you were to ask me about these 2 games, I would have looked at you and said, hey, these are 2 games which we should be at 9-4 by this time next Sunday. But now there's a lot of questions. Can we even get to 6 wins on the season after Thursday night?
Well, I mean, it's this team can't take anybody for granted. I think we have discovered that. There's no question they're not good enough. I mean, a lot of their wins have been, walking that straight line, and they were completely swerving up and down that line today. I think a lot of attention is going to be on the quarterback situation going into Thursday. I thought Dave made a good point about how Connor was bottled up in the first half, and then had just completely running roughshod in the second half. And part of that was the injury to Landon Roberts. I think that's the bigger of the injuries that's got to concern this team, because he's been having a tremendous season. He's quite the leader on the field, and they're just so thin now at inside linebacker. I mean, now they're shuffling safeties down in the box, and Arizona exploited that. The middle of the field is where they hurt us the most, both running and passing the pigskin. So I think while everybody's going to be talking about quarterback, I don't know that that's an issue. I think the Landon Roberts injury really hurt them today and could hurt them going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was it his groin, I think, is what was hurt. And we know from Mika Fitzpatrick, Dave and Chris, start with Dave, out multiple weeks. He finally came back today, but you didn't hear too much about Mika as well, as he was just trying to get back into game mode. TJ Watt, I thought he had 2 sacks. I just looked at the stats. They have him for a half a sack. So, and they had Highsmith for 1.5. I would think that'll probably be updated here at some point. I thought he had 2 sacks in that game. But maybe the statisticians doing the game, sometimes they change those afterwards. But yeah, Mika was quiet. Watt, who had been quiet, and Highsmith, who had been quiet the weeks. Those guys got going, especially in the first half, but in the second half, not so much. And of course, Watt got banged up.
Absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right about the Roberts injury, because you are as thin as a piece of paper right now in inside linebacker, and that kills you. And I'm having sympathy groin pains for him at this point. But that's going to be a killer. And you may get, I mean, you got Kyler Murray back with Arizona, so there were some positives for them coming in. If you pull this kind of crap against a New England team that's down, that's playing Bailey Zapp, who was a great quarterback at Western Kentucky, but not much of a in my eyes, not much of a pro potential in New England. So you're not exactly playing a team that is getting players back that looks like it has a good future. So if you come out flat against New England, I mean, that to me, that's a season right there. And I can understand why, I'm seeing all the irritated messages here, and I can see it, man. I mean, this was a bad performance, and you should beat New England. New England, in my eyes, is a worse team than Arizona, but you got to come out. I don't know what you do at inside linebacker. I don't know whether you play a couple safeties in there and maybe go to that defense, but they got some problems with the inside at this point.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead, jump in there. Your thoughts on the injuries.
And complicating that, Dave, you got a 4-day turnaround too.
Yeah.
So you got a short week. You're a banged up team. I didn't hear what they've said about either Pickett or Watt at this point, but you're right. I mean, inside linebacker for a long time has been an issue for the Steelers. They're very thin there. That was, if you look at all of the injuries, that's the one that's going to hurt the most.
Talk about the Mason Rudolph, Chris.
Yeah, there's going to be people calling for him. I mean, there's going to be people calling. Why didn't he get the chance, Dave? Why didn't he? I can understand that they probably didn't prepare him to be the backup going into this game, but again, Trubisky, you get what you get. And Mason Rudolph, why not give him a shot at this point? I mean, Kenny, if it's a high ankle sprain, I mean, he had a boot up to his knee. I mean, it could be a high ankle sprain. If it's that, you ain't going to see him for a while. No.
Did you guys think Trubisky was bad when he came in?
I thought he was average. I
thought he was I thought he was Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah.
We go over the Trubisky numbers for the game. Hold on, I'll bring those up for you for a second. Before we talk about that, just a couple guys. Miles, Gary Carlin says Miles Jack. That's a good point. Miles Jack was signed to the practice squad, I believe, last week. So I would think he would probably get elevated to the 53-man roster this week.
I'm looking at this one from Dylan Fletcher telling us we'll be punished for our crimes against nature. I know about the cloning labs.
Oh, I didn't even see that one on there.
That's a
Star Wars reference.
Oh, okay. There you go. All right. Very good. I'm not a Star Wars good. tip my hat off to that. Just to also talk about the quarterback situation this afternoon for the Steelers. When you take a look at Mason Rudolph, he was actually inactive today. But Dawn, you corrected me during our text messages back and forth. Though he was inactive, he was still the third emergency quarterback, so he could have been elevated to play this afternoon. But again, that's been one of the points up until last week when everybody was talking about Canada and Pickett struggling. There was talk about, well, should we bring in Mitch or should we bring in Mason? Mason Rudolph, a guy that's been around here forever, really has not been given any type of shot at all. A lot of people want to see Rudolph. I would, of course, start Mitch Trubisky, but I would have a short leash on him as well. He comes out struggling, throws a couple costly picks pretty quick. I would not, if I was Mike Tomlin, hesitate at all to get Mason Rudolph in there. If Kenny Pickett is indeed out, which right now on a 4-day turnaround, I would probably think he would be.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that, Dawn, as far as the Steelers quarterback situation?
I mean, if I don't know about a short leash, but if he's struggling, you're getting to a point now where you got to, with the way the AFC playoff field is, again, this loss right here kicks you in the gut as far as chances of the division crown, which I thought was really their only hope for a long, or for some success in the postseason. There's no way I see this as any sort of Super Bowl team. But I thought, you hang a game behind Baltimore, beat them in the regular season finale, then you get a home game and maybe have a playoff win or two. But now you with the schedule ahead, some tough road games, they got to win. So while I'm not maybe as willing to say quick or short leash, quick trigger, whatever, definitely Mason's got to get some reps and be ready to go if Trubisky struggles, because they have to win on Thursday.
And Dave and Chris, the stats this afternoon for the Steelers quarterbacks: Kenny Pickett, before he got hurt, 7 of 10, 70 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Mitch Trubisky in 11 of 17, 117 yards, 1 touchdown. Deontay Johnson. By the way, did you guys catch Deontay Johnson celebrating when it went to 24-10? All three of you are shaking your head.
Yeah.
I was curious, and I'm going to be very curious to watch social media here in the next couple of days if anybody else picked up on that as well. Yeah. My goodness, I didn't understand that.
It must be this new world where you flip bats when you're hitting a home run down by 8 runs, or you got to think my team's getting their butts kicked here. Let's get to the next play. Let's try to get the onside kick. Let's see what we can do. But you sure as hell don't celebrate at that point in time, at least in my eyes.
Dave, would you have gone onside at that point?
I would have. You're down 2 touchdowns, not a lot of time left. And
the way that defense was playing, I had no confidence that they were going to stop them.
Yeah.
So I would have had to have gone that time. Usually I wouldn't. But
and I agree with you, but at that point it was the only option. It was a bad call not to do it.
Oh. So after the Steelers go, they get the touchdown with Deontay Johnson, 24-10. I think there's 4 minutes and change left. I thought they would go onside as well. They didn't. Dawn, you're shaking your head. You don't agree.
No, I don't. While I hear you guys as far as, especially in the second half, how the defense, after that 99-yard drive, the defense did not do well at all. But if you can get a stop, if Arizona, again, they're a 2-win team for a reason, shoots itself in the foot, coughs up the football. We saw 2 fumbles in the third quarter that they both recovered. Then you're in business. If it was the onside kick rules from 10 years ago or 5 years ago, I'm in there. But it's so difficult to recover an onside kick, and you're going to have to do that if you stop them, drive down. Then at that point, you still need another score. You're going to have to rely on the onside kick. But I thought, stop them, use your timeouts. But at that point, the defense was shot. Connor he was gaining bushel loads of yards every carry.
Which league has the I'll give you the ball 4th and 10 instead of an onside kick.
Was that XFL?
I think it's the XFL.
XFL, yeah.
That was kind of a wild concept. I kind of like that. Let's do that. Let's get the ball 4th and 10 next time.
No, let's put the ball at the 50-yard line and have people run out to get it to see who's going to have the first.
Well, Chris, that was the original XFL, and I think Vince McMahon was the guy who dropped the football at the 50.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Like in hockey, but it was a football concept.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
No,
man.
but those are good points, Don. I mean, that is. But I just kept thinking the time, and I mean the 3rd and 6 when you had a chance to stop them, and Connor runs for what was it, 12?
Yeah, 12. Yeah,
becoming the 6th ex-Steeler to gain over 100 yards against the Steelers. There you have it. There's your stat of the day.
Wow, who knew?
Can you name the other ones, Dave?
I can't. Billy Hillgrove mentioned it as I was getting out of the car. So
we'll give you a bye on that one, man. Real quick, just to finish up the Steelers stats for the day, and then we'll run through the AFC playoff picture, and then we'll call it a day as the Steelers lose 24-10 this afternoon. You're watching the Steelers postgame show here on Oneberg, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And you're with me. I'm your host, Ed Troop, Don Rebel from the Trib Live High School Sports Network. Dave Finoli and Chris Fletch host a weekly podcast on Sportsnet. Finoli and Fletch on sports. Make sure you check those guys out if you haven't yet. Just some final stats, guys, for the Steelers receiving core. George Pickens, 4 catches, 86 yards this afternoon. Deontay Johnson, 4 catches, 33 yards, and a touchdown. One other note, Pat Freiermuth, who had a big game last week, held the 3 catches this afternoon for 29 yards. The running game started out strong. Najee Harris, 16 carries, 63-yard game. Jalen Warren, 9 carries, 59 yards. As a team, 31 rushes, 130 yards. Steelers go over 100 yards again. I believe that's their 5th or 6th straight game this season. They've gone over 100. But they had to, unfortunately, with the weather delays and everything going on, and they were playing catch-up, especially into that second half, they had to abandon the running game. We didn't really see Najee Harris very much other than catching balls out of the backfield this afternoon for the black and gold. Let's talk quick about the AFC playoff picture as we sit right now, probably halfway through the 4 o'clock games in the AFC. Miami 9-3, number 1. They won today. Baltimore's on their bye finally. They're 9-3. You got Kansas City playing in Philadelphia, playing against 8-3 right now, Kansas City. 49ers. Are the 49ers playing the Eagles right now? I think I got that mixed up, right? Okay. Thank you. Kansas City 8-3. Jacksonville 3. Cleveland 7-4. The Steelers now 7-5. Indianapolis 7-5. The Steelers still have to play at Indianapolis in a couple weeks, and then you have Houston 7-5. And as I said, Houston, I believe in this scenario now would, of course, jump the Steelers because they would own the tiebreaker, having beaten the Steelers earlier this season. So the way I look at this right now, the Steelers going into today's games were the 5th seed on. Now I believe they would be the 8th seed looking out of the playoff picture.
Yeah, I mean, the week's unfinished. Basically, what this terrible loss, has done is basically make the game in a few weeks at Indianapolis almost a must-win because you've fallen back in the pack with them. You mentioned that any tiebreaker with Houston straight up you're going to lose. So that really makes that game at Indianapolis. I mean, they got to take care of business against New England Thursday, but they'll have that little 10-day break, and that game at the Colts becomes massive.
Yeah, it does. And Dave, you can jump in here as well about the AFC playoff picture. As Dawn said, again, the Colts have been an up and down team this year as well. And right now they're on the up, even though Jonathan Taylor, their star running back, is out. They came back at Tennessee had taken the lead in overtime with a field goal. And of course, the way the NFL rules on overtime, the other team gets another chance if a touchdown isn't scored. And Gardner Minshew, man, the guy that just never quits, took them right down the field. They get a touchdown and win that game, and thus gets to 7-5 on the season.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need to be a minimum of 10-7 to entertain a playoff spot. And you look at your final 5 games. Next week is imperative. I mean, next week you lose that game, you're done. You're going to Baltimore at the end of the season. I mean, that's a rivalry. Baltimore's not going to sit back and if they have the division clinched and they're going to go there. So the Steeler-Colts game is imperative, but the one game that I think is most imperative is that Steelers-Seahawks game. The Seahawks are going to be fighting for a playoff spot there at 6-6, a dangerous team, and the Steelers don't have a history of playing well in Seattle. So I think that is a game that now you're forcing yourself to have to win. Bengals, certainly a winnable game, but again, a lot depends. Let's look at what happens to Kenny Pickett too, because you lose him. I don't see them being a 10-7 team at the outset. I see 9-8.
I think that's a great point with Kenny Pickett, man. That's going to determine a lot here in the next couple of days when we find out about what and Roberts we talked about as well, that being in that middle linebacker position, a huge lot potentially as well for multiple games, if not maybe the rest of the season at this point. Chris, why don't you jump in as well to talk a little bit about the AFC playoff picture and what the Steelers have left.
Well, Dave, I think you can't overlook Thursday. I mean, really, I think it's one game at a time. You can't overlook any of these games. It's going to be a tough slog down the end. I mean, right now, to me, Miami is a really dangerous team. They put up a lot of points. They're fast, getting great quarterback play. They're ones to look out for. That last game could be interesting, though, because who knows if Baltimore's going to have anything to play for. They could be resting some people. We don't know.
But let's put it in perspective here. Even if they make the playoffs, this is not a team that's I could even imagine going beyond 1 or 2 games. I mean, we're not talking. I mean,
listen, you just want to get invited to the party. Then anything can happen.
And I think go ahead, Don.
I was just going to jump in and say it's such a terrible. I mean, we're all on the same page. Everybody chiming in here on the sidebar agrees. This is a despicable loss. The only silver lining is it was against an NFC team, so it doesn't hurt from that perspective of tiebreakers, the conference record.
Yeah. But I mean, you got to win 3 of those last 5, and I mean the Patriot game is a do or die. You have to win that game. You don't win that game, you don't win 10 games.
Yep.
Right. That's what I mean. You can't look past Thursday.
No.
Well, Don, I know you brought this point with me earlier too when we were texting. This game, the Steelers, virtue by losing, if they're in that 5th spot, I don't want to say they have an easy wild card game, but they have an easier game. Now you drop down, and now you're fighting to get in potentially at that 7th seed. Now you got to go on the road to a number 2 seed in that scenario. So it really changes things dramatically here. And again, we got a lot to play out. A lot of things can still change. And I want to get to that in a second too, because every time the Steelers have lost a game this season, it's been doom and gloom here on Oneberg. You've seen all the comments. We've come on this show, and Brian's come on, and he's deemed them dead. And then they bounce back the next week, and all of a sudden we forget about that loss. So this one hurts a little bit more because it was the 2-10 Cardinals.
Yeah, the NFL, there's no question. The NFL is a week-to-week league where you can look like world beaters one week. You can come out and lay an egg the next week. The point that I told you about, whether it's 5th, whether it's 6th, whether it's 7th, I think that's a one-and-done formula for this team. I think their best chance to win a game or 2 was by winning the North, and I think this loss puts a big time damper on that.
Dave, you agree?
No, absolutely. While right now I'm the biggest Los Angeles Ram fan in the world, as they're beating the Browns at halftime. Yeah, I absolutely agree. If you just sneak in there on the last seed, I know what happened in 2004, but this is not a 2004 team, not by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
Chris, Steelers
2005.
season. The Steelers this season lose to the 49ers. They bounce back and beat the Browns. They lost to the Texans. They bounced back, beat the Ravens. They lost to the Jaguars. They bounced back on a Thursday night and beat the Titans. They lose at the Browns a couple weeks ago. They bounce back, go to Cincinnati last week and win. They have not lost. One thing we can say about this team so far, they have not lost back-to-back football games, and that's why they're sitting at 7-5. Final thoughts on the Steelers' 24-10 loss this afternoon at Acrisure Stadium?
Well, we could just say when they lose, they don't mess around. But you mentioned them bouncing back, and I'll get a little flack for this, but it's because of coaching. Coach Tomlin brings them back. He has never lost this team. People say, well, they always have that cliche of never having a losing record. Well, the thing is, he's never lost his team, and that's the thing that we have to look at here.
Yeah.
Dawn, your final thoughts this afternoon?
I agree with Chris. That's my final thoughts.
I've always been a Tomlin guy, and for Chris and Dave, Dawn and I text a lot during these games. I'm sure you guys do as well. And last week, for the first time, I kind of called Tomlin out a little bit with Dawn. And they were losing early to Cincinnati. Things didn't look good. He can't lose this game on the road. And Dawn put me in my place pretty quick. Much like Brian did on this show when I came on the air and said, hey, the offense looked completely different today. Canada's gone. We got it. We're okay. And then he completely demolished me. So I was 0 for 2 last week, but Dawn did bring me back to my senses.
Tomlin's not covering up the offensive tackle. He's not face masking on punt returns. I mean, I know that, the head coach is got to have his team prepared. I don't buy into that either. These are pros. They got to be prepared. They failed in every aspect, including coaching. And so let's flush this one away.
Dave, your final thoughts on this afternoon's Steeler upset loss at home?
Yeah, I agree as far as the point he doesn't lose a team. I mean, Chris knows I've been a fan. Not easy to win every year in the NFL. And I agree that is the thing. As far as this loss goes and the bounce back factor, I think basically this cost them a legitimate playoff shot because this was a game you had to win. If you get in, you're going to get in on the back of your behind, and you're going to get, in my eyes, crushed in the first round. But unlike most people out there, I don't think there's a great deal of talent on this team at this point. As Don said earlier, it's a rebuilding. You've got some pieces in place, but until you get an offensive line in place, I don't care who you have at quarterback. You're not going to succeed.
Well, that's a great point because we've actually talked about this throughout the season that us as Steeler fans get a little bit greedy. This is a rebuilding time. We lost our franchise quarterback who retired just a couple seasons ago. And, you don't have to look any further than New England when Brady left. The Packers are starting to figure it out a little bit with Jordan Love now. But let's face it, since Aaron Rodgers is gone and has been hurt the last couple of years, they've struggled to figure things out there. You could even look at the Indianapolis Colts going back to when Peyton Manning left and they had a replacement there for a while. But this is not an easy thing for NFL franchises to do when you have such stability at such an important position at quarterback and the way the rest of that team follows, that it's going to take us a few years to find that answer. Kenny Pickett's the answer. Maybe he's not. We don't know yet. I still think the jury's out. I think it's safe to say. Who knows? They could be drafting another quarterback this season.
I will make one comparison. It's not a Ben, it's not a Bradshaw comparison, but Neil O'Donnell struggled very much like this at the beginning of his career when they started putting the pieces in place. Forget about Super Bowl 30 interceptions. Neil O'Donnell was a hell of a quarterback for that team in those years, 94 through the
96.
Tom Zick come in 96. But O'Donnell was a hell of a quarterback at that point in time once he got the pieces in. I believe in Kenny Pickett. I believe in his football intelligence. He's a leader, and I think once you get the pieces around him, he may not be a Ben Roethlisberger, but he's going to be a good quarterback.
You can catch Dave Finoli and Chris Fletcher on the Sports and Podcast, their weekly podcast, Finoli and Fletch on Sports. Guys, anything coming up on the show this week? And when can we catch it? I don't have the date or time in front of me here.
Usually we release it on Wednesday evenings. We're in the process of trying to get one of our favorite guys who was a former Condor by the name of Stu Johnson. So we're most likely going to have him on this week. And he was the first African-American south of the Mason-Dixon line to get a a Division I basketball scholarship in the 60s. And he has a
Very
great
cool.
inspirational story. He played for Murray State before he came to the ABA. At one point in time, he held the all-time ABA scoring single game record. And he's just a very neat guy. And his daughter Precious plays for
Duquesne.
right now. But we're going to have him on this month. We're going to have a retrospective show with EJ Borghetti talking about the 60th anniversary of the 1963 Pitt football team. Was 9-1, didn't go to a bowl game because JFK was shot. And we're going to explain more about that. And EJ's father, Ernie Borghetti, was an All-American on that team. So we're going to talk a little about that this month. And we'll have Dan Burt on, the Duquesne women's basketball coach.
And Roberto Clemente Jr. will be dropping by too.
Always a favorite.
Cool, guys. Solid show. It sounds like upcoming this week, and make sure everybody checks it out there as well. And Dawn with the Trib Live High School Sports Network. Dawn, before I let you go, real quick, we got to talk high school football for just a second. I know you're not good on predictions, but all 6 WPIAL champions heading to, is it Mechanicsburg?
Mechanicsburg, Cumberland Valley High School. Yep.
Cumberland Valley High School for the PIAA state championship games this upcoming week. Any tidbits or nuggets, as we like to say, you and I do, or factoids. About this? There's factoids. That's the word I'm looking for.
It's actually 5. Westinghouse beat Beaver Falls, so Beaver Falls is the lone WPL team that won't be going. But Westinghouse City League, second straight year for them. They're going up against State Power Southern Columbia. North Allegheny faces State Power St. Joe's. Peters Township faces State Power Imhotep Charter. All those schools from District 12. Imhotep and St. Joe's are from District 12, the Philadelphia area. It's only the second time the WPIAL has sent 5 teams to the state championships. 2 years ago was the first time. They're going to have their hands full. I would expect 2 teams, maybe 3, to bring gold home. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it's more. But there's some pretty darn good teams that I call them the 6-pack from southwestern Pennsylvania will be facing Thursday, Friday, Saturday in the state finals.
And one of those teams, the Bell Vernon area Leopards, trying to defend their Class 3A championship. And Dawn knows, but Dave and Chris, you might not know, I'm a BVA guy. That's where I went to school. And
nice.
So shout out to the Leopards as they try to get their second straight state championship game in Class 3A. And kind of cool for me, I live in the Cannon District, but I'm right on the border of I actually live in McDonald, so I'm right on the border of Fort Cherry. And Fort Cherry going for the state championship as well this weekend. And it's been so cool to see the community of McDonald rally around the Fort Cherry Rangers as they go for the state title this week. So I know I'll be watching later this week, at least those 2 games. And Dawn, I just count Westinghouse as a Whitfield team. I know they're technically City League, but yeah, you're right. Technicality there. The City League. You and I have seen many a games at George K. Couple Stadium on the south side. So I don't know, Chris and Dave, before we hang up and wrap it up, if you guys have any thoughts on high school football.
Well, I'm a long-suffering Greensburg Central Catholic fighting Centurion person, so we don't get as excited about high school football. But, my question to Don, big controversy about some of those schools in the center of the state. Should they be playing for state titles, or should they have their own section? What do you think about that?
That's the hot button topic. It's been for a few years. Part of the problem is there's no boundaries. It's not necessarily a private public thing, which I think was the initial argument. But even now, I think at least I'm speaking now about southwestern Pennsylvania, when the old Catholic School League merged with the WPIAL, or all those schools became part of the WPIAL in the 70s. those schools had boundaries. You know, if you lived here, you went to Central Catholic. If you lived here, you went to South Catholic, which became Seton LaSalle. If you lived in the West End, you went to Canavan. That's not a thing anymore, and so that's probably the biggest debate. Is especially from the public school folks, is that they have certain rules they got to follow, while some of these other schools don't. Another factor too, I mentioned District 12. Not all districts work the same way. So when kids transfer, at least around here, they have to be approved by the WPIAL. And I think the District 7 is the WPIAL. They do a good job in trying to, those kids that are moving for sports related reasons, athletic intent, that's illegal, and they try to do what they can to prevent that. Whereas other districts, especially District 12, has a reputation for not being as firm in transfer cases, and thus the top schools almost become like a glamorized AAU team or an all-star team. So that's an ugly situation that, until there are more concrete rules, is going to continue to fester.
Don, how impressive is that Aliquippa team, though?
Oh my gosh, we won't appreciate what they're doing probably for another 10, 15, 20 years, when they sort of come back to earth, if they ever come back to earth. It's a Class A enrollment, smallest enrollment. Now, actually, the numbers came out for the next 2 years. They would have been 2A, but they're going to stay for football in 4A because of the amount of success they've had. And they're not, they're not only competing 3 levels higher than they should be, but they're dominating. And they've won 3 consecutive WPL championships. They've been to the district finals 16 straight years. And now they're trying to win their second state title in 3 years. It truly is remarkable. And again, I don't know that we around here will truly appreciate it until years down the road.
And if you have an opportunity to go to the new Heinz Field in Aliquippa to go see the Quips play, I highly encourage you to do it during the high school football season. I did the game for the Trib Live High School Sports Network, the kickoff game that they hosted. And what was that, Dawn? Week 1 or 2? It was I think it might have been week 2.
I think it was week 1.
Week 1 at home, and to see that and see that field and the $1 million renovations that they have done, and they're going to continue to do. They're building a field house as well. Chris, to answer your question, it is such a cool thing in Aliquippa. And I just saw in the news the other day the city of Aliquippa is out of financial.
Yep.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of good things happening in that community right now, even outside the football team. But one could beg to make an argument that the football team has kind of sprungboard that in that area in Beaver County. But that is a fantastic place to go, and can't say enough good things about us. That's for sure.
More Hall of Famers than any other high school.
I was just about
absolutely.
Yep.
And I still remember calling. I'm this old. I remember seeing Darrell Rivas doing Darrell Rivas games when he was at Aliquippa back in the day. So, but man, those were in the early days of my high school football broadcasting. But he was fun to watch. All right, well, that's going to do it for our post-game show here this afternoon. I want to thank my guest, Dawn Rebel of the Trib Live High School Sports Network. Appreciate it, Dawn. Dave Finoli and Fletcher joining us as well. Gentlemen, we'll be sure to check out the Finoli and Fletch on Sports podcast, the weekly podcast on Sports and At. They have a jam-packed show coming up this week. And a couple other notes before we sign off. Happy birthday, Brian Carruthers. Not on the show tonight, celebrating his birthday. He will be with me. And gentlemen, if you're up at like 12 o'clock midnight on Thursday and you want to jump on here till 1 a.m., feel free. Brian and I will be on as we were a couple of the primetime games this year. It was fun. And the Oneberg Incline Show, I have to give a shout out to that. If you haven't checked that out on Oneberg yet with Brian, it's Tuesday fun. At 5. That drops. Yeah. His guest this week is none other than your Olympic hero, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle rides the incline with Brian, and it's a very interesting show. You definitely want to check it out. Brian does a great job with that. It's not long either. It's I think it's like 7 or 8 minutes. Quick interview, but really good stuff. Make sure you check that out on Oneberg this week. That's good. Our broadcast for this evening. The Steelers unfortunately losing 24-10 to the Arizona Cardinals It is our post-game show. We will see you Thursday night. Thursday Night Football as the Steelers host the 2-10 New England Patriots. Have a great sports Sunday, and we'll catch you Thursday night after the Steelers Patriots.